In his book, The Painting That Shocked the World, Miles Unger depicts a story of a painting, in this case, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon by Picasso, but he embeds it in an evolutionary story of art, history, of social consciousness, which culminates in, as in his words, a revolution of consciousness. It's the story of Picasso as an artist. It's the story of modern art as a movement. It's the story of the combination of scientific progress and cultural evolution, specifically the uh, development of general relativity and quantum physics at the turn of the 20th century, which actually is complementary to the art movement that we now call modern art. And the combination is shown in many ways. There's like fingerprints left all over the book, showing, for example, the multidimensional portraits of Picasso's nudes that show a quantum state of a person, a person that can be shown from the front and the back, and old and young at the same time. We have space-time, which is a state of affairs, which is almost a deterministic, a grid-like or matrix-like state of the universe, and Picasso shows that in his paintings. So there's a lot of steps and a lot of fingerprints left in the book that basically all culminate in the conclusion that scientific progress and art history and artistic progress and the revolution of consciousness of humanity, they're all intertwined. I want to use this as a springboard for my reflection in this episode, which is it's an allegory to the book, and the title of the episode is the car that shocked the world, and or maybe I should say the truck that shocked the world, and it's the Cybertruck. And I wanna discuss the concept of radical design and what it actually means. Radical, in a sense, or what is radical? It's different. It's a new step in the consciousness of humanity, and therefore it's a lot more important than we might think. Because in the same way, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon at some point was just a canvas, but it was more than a canvas. It was a crossroads of human development, of human history, of art history, of all kinds of things that culminate in what we today call the evolution of humanity in general. It's driven by science. It's driven by consciousness that culminates in science, but also in art. Now, the Cybertruck, which is the truck that shocked the world, is a radical design, right? It's a radical design in many ways. But I want to ask myself a couple of things. First, where does it come from? Is it a coincidence that the Cybertruck was conceived within the confines of Tesla? Why Tesla? Why not Ford, or why not Apple, or some other startup? What are the parallels? How can we sort of use the knowledge from Unger's book about Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which I think it's an excellent book, by the way, in terms of inspiring. You learn a lot, and it's a nice narrative, and it's interesting, and all that kind of stuff. But it's most importantly, it's really inspiring because it makes you think about today. It makes you think about what's going on. So we have a couple of things that are happening, I think, today that might lead to the concept of radical design. Like, what you need for radical design, you need something radical to happen. Whether it's the French Revolution, whether it's in the turn of the century, what happened at the turn of the century, we had radical inventions in science, really breakthrough stuff. We had Newton in the 18th century, and then we had Einstein and Heisenberg in the 20th century. We haven't had anything since, unless we want to count the revolution in artificial intelligence as another massive revolution of consciousness, which, by the way, we here at Orange Capital Partners, we abide to that thinking, right? We think that we are actually in another paradigm shift, to use Thomas Kuhn's framework. So we have Newton, we have Einstein slash Heisenberg, and now we have, call it AI. There's no names attached to it per se. There's the three musketeers, Hinton, LeCun, and Bengio, but I would say it goes further back. You can even throw in von Neumann and Turing here. So let's not get too boggled down with words and definitions. Let's just call it, we have Galileo, we have Newton, we have Einstein, Heisenberg, and we have AI. Let me discuss all of these steps and then sort of weave in the concept of radical design, because we think the Cybertruck shows more than just a radical design. It's a whole new consciousness. It's a whole new thinking of what is possible. It opens up new possibilities. It expands humanity's horizons, and therefore it's radical. That's why it's radical. So radical doesn't mean you throw shit at the wall or you walk around naked in a gallery. I'm not talking about that kind of radicalism, which is fine. Artists do that all the time. I find the radical design that really matters is the kind of Les Demoiselles d'Avignon type of radical design, which is you open up new viewpoints, you embed yourself in the science and the social consciousness of the time, and then you step out. You say, okay, wow, these are new ideas. Well, this is where we could go. Let me start with a little bit of the history of science, and then let me weave the history of art into that, and then hopefully we can get a conclusion where we stand today and why the truck that shocked the world, the Cybertruck, is much, much more than just an interesting product. It's a road sign. It's a signal that something massive is happening. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's March 31st, 2024. This is Cryptelco. There's no update today. It's actually Easter Sunday today. For the year, we are down 16.7. The market's up 10.1. We're underperforming by 27.7. So like I said, the outline of this episode is I'm going to give a little bit of the history of science, weave the history of art into it, and then hopefully conclude in why I believe that the radical design of the Cybertruck is a lot more than just a radical product and a good product or bad product, whatever. It's not about that. It's about the culmination of a new scientific paradigm which shows itself, which reveals itself under the hood, pun intended here, of Cybertruck. Cybertruck is a lot of things. It's an electric car, and it's a radically designed electric car. So there's really two massive components here. We have electricity as the driving force of the future, and then we have a radical design, a masculinity, by the way, which is transgender. So it's not the masculinity of man versus woman. It's the masculinity of I can go and get it done, which applies to any kind of gender, any kind of identity you wanna choose. And if you don't like the word masculinity, then be my guest, find something new. But the traditional way we understand, let's say, the man's consciousness in society is he's the guy who goes out there, hunts, makes things happen, takes things into his own hands, is accountable for his actions, is admired by mates, and is responsible for inspiring offsprings to do even better. Again, this can apply to any kind of gender, so I don't want to be embedded in this type of conversation. I am happy to accept a woman or somebody else with another type of gender identity who plays that role. That's not the point here. The point is, again, the sort of the stereotype, and I have to use the stereotype to be able to express myself. So it's this masculinity, whether you want to call it the Mad Max or the Martian type, symbol, the Martian from the book and the movie with Matt Damon. It's the person that can go to Mars, survive, make it happen, survive, take life into his own account. This is what the Cybertruck um, reveals. This is what comes. This is the force that this radical design shows. Now, of course, that is descriptive, right? It doesn't mean much, and you could say, well, okay, fine, well, this is like discussing the Ferrari Dino or the Porsche 911. It's just an old Bauhaus or whatever. And to some extent, a lot of these designs also had their social and historic and scientific meanings. I think the Cybertruck is a little bit more deeper. It's more like Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. It's a crossroads. It's a new direction of humanity, which shows itself in this design. And I wanna sort of elaborate. Let me indulge a little bit in going back into history and then come to the conclusion like a little bit step by step. But anyway, for those who are not patient, I'm gonna give you the conclusion. The Cybertruck is a radical design because we live in radical times. We have a new consciousness. We have a revolution of consciousness, and the revolution of consciousness comes from the AI, which is changing the way we think about theory. Theory is in the weights. And whatever we do and whatever the machine actually does, whether it's come up with new art or new science, that is the manifestation of the theory. The theory is in the weights, and the way we develop theories in today and in the near future is going to be, we're going to ask ourselves, what is the kind of data we need to train the algorithm and the model, and what kind of infrastructure do we need to train the machine to come up with interesting weights that can then solve interesting problems. This is the new consciousness. It's in a way the next level of theorizing. So if we go back to Galileo, which again I would like to do that. So why don't I do that and then come to the conclusion that I just depicted. So let's go back to Galileo. Why is Galileo an important crossroads in human history? It's because we're splitting away from scholastic theory. Scholastic theory until Galileo is that the church describes what is and what isn't. To some extent, it has the authority on knowledge because that's where knowledge was actually created and maintained in the monasteries of the church. So the church takes over if you will, the baton from philosophers and people like that from the antiquity, and over about 1,000 years, the church runs the show as far as knowledge is concerned, for better or for worse. For worse, certainly, if we look at things like Inquisition and also the stagnation of science, because the church, of course, has a political agenda. There's certain things that just can't be disproven, such as creationism, the flat earth, and all that stuff. Galileo comes along and really invents one thing, and that is, how about we follow observations and not scholastic theory, and how about we use math to describe what we see? So, two things. We see something, which is observation, and second, let's use math as a language. Math is available as a language. He's not reinventing the wheel on that front. He's just saying, why don't we use math to describe nature? So two radical inventions. Let's look at observations. Why is the apple falling from the apple's falling from the tree? As far as I'm concerned, that's the way I see it. I could be wrong about my impression. Maybe it's all just illusion. Maybe whatever. But anyway, that's how I see it and how I feel it. If I lay below a tree and an apple falls on me, I'm gonna feel that thing. So there is something going on. So how about we use math to depict that whatever is going on. So this is invention number one, okay? Or excuse me, this is roadside number one with two inventions, observation and math. Enter Newton about 100 something years later, Principia Mathematica. What is that? It's the culmination of Galileo in a book that lays down the groundwork for what Galileo was trying to achieve. So it's basically the laws of physics. The patterns that we observe, all the stuff that we observe is put together in a concise, structured way. The laws of, three laws of Newton, and then all that kind of stuff, gravity, right? So what has Newton done? It's not so much that he's reinventing the wheel. I think Galileo's invention, if you will, is much more daring. Also, I think he ended up in jail or whatever because of that. So he had to fight demons. He's the Demoiselles d'Avignon of science in the 17th century or 15th, something. Anyway. But what Newton does, he puts it all together. So he's a bit like Mendeleev with the periodic table, right? Here's a structure. Here's a map how you can navigate through this thing we call nature. I'm not reinventing too many new wheels. Some of them maybe I'm adding a few features here and there. My action, reaction, the force, a couple of these formulas are interesting. How the planets move around and all of that stuff. But overall, I'm just doing what Galileo said. I'm just doing it a little bit better. I have some interesting ideas in math. I developed calculus together with Leibniz and Laplace and people like that. We use some other things like whatever the predecessors of matrix algebra. Like there's some inventions, but it's still math, right? So now let me talk a little bit about society, right? These things are not isolated. This is the key of this particular episode, right? We have revolutions in design. We have revolutions in literal revolutions, such as the French Revolution, which are all intertwined with these developments. For example, the French Revolution comes along in terms of, hey, we are not going to swallow this church scholastic social structure anymore and suffer under it because we observe things differently, we feel differently, we have the means to do it, we have weapons which come from the technology that are underlying Newton's theories, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. We have the code, so the same way the Newtonian physics describes nature, why don't we describe society a little bit different? Why don't we invent the law? And by the way, the law in a modern sense, in a U.S. or Western Europe sense, not in a like the king wakes up with a bad temper and just changes the law. Not that kind of law. The law where the French call it le code or something like that. The code. Napoleon goes around after the French Revolution, fights wars, and however bad those wars were, the one thing he did though, he brought in the code. For example, where I grew up in Switzerland, we owe that to Napoleon. That we took over the code. The idea to organize a society according to laws. Why not? If we know the laws of physics, why not introduce laws of society? So you see the connection here. So let's jump forward another 130, 40 years. Einstein and Heisenberg. Why both of them? Because they both did something radical in two different domains. One, in the domain of extremely large and fast objects, relativity, general relativity, space-time, speed of light, those kind of things. Versus the other one, Heisenberg does it on the very small. How do electrons move around? How do electrons and atoms and neutrons and protons, how do they behave? The latter is today called quantum physics, and the former relativistic physics. Of course, in the end, they're the same. We haven't been able to really merge them together yet, but it's the same thing. Certainly, we are of the opinion, we meaning as a humanity, as an academy, I would say everybody is on board with the idea that at some point quantum gravity and relativistic physics and quantum physics can be combined into one theory. We just don't know how to do it yet, but that's okay. So what is the big innovation that both of these men bring to the table? Well, one is that we have certain limits in terms of how small things can be and how fast and how big things can be. That's the quantization of the world, right? That's one thing which has a profound effect on the way people think, also on the questions people ask. I mean, if things are quantized, then what is the smallest piece? E equals mc squared says there's no such thing as the smallest piece. Once you put enough energy into something, you just change, matter morphs into something else, and that's it. So there's no such thing as the smallest thing. Well, the smallest thing could be the Heisenberg constant, or the Planck constant, or there's a smallest sort of time period, which is that little itch of Heisenberg uncertainty when you go from one state to the other. That little thing in between, which is defined by the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that is actually the smallest amount of time that you can ever physically get to. So there's things like that, but fundamentally, I think important for society, and that's where the Demoiselles d'Avignon comes in. It's we have on the small scale, we can't observe things with our senses, so we have to actually fall back to theory. So we're going away now from Galileo, which is, again, remember, Galileo is, I only believe what I see, and I'm going to use math to describe it. Well, in the quantum world, you can't do that because you can't see it, but you know it's there, and you need theory to describe. So that's fundamental. That is the beginning of modernity. In the art world, that's exactly what happens. I see art through my brain. I think what I see. I need theory in order to see. So those things, let's keep them as a sort of placeholder for now, but that's really important. And on the Einstein side of things, what we have is space-time in particular. The Demoiselles d'Avignon and the follow-up of Cubism shows, let's say, a person at the same time ugly and beautiful and old and young and man and woman. So a lot of these things are ephemeral. We have a certain locality, which is today, right now, I am what I am, but I am in sort of space-time or Hilbert space, or in that kind of, from that point of view, I could be many things, and then, or I am many things. My space-time picture would look more like a cubist painting, and then locality means today, right now, in this particular location, I am here, and this is how I look, and of course, I'm not old and young at the same time. I am just something today, but that is in the eye of the beholder, and those are the kinds of, that's what Unger, I think, means when he talks about the revolution of consciousness. Now, Unger is very careful with words, and he's not as explicit as I am in terms of saying, well, what Einstein's just, Picasso is an illustration of space-time of Einstein. He's not saying that, but that's my conclusion. That's the way I perceive it. I think really interesting in this context now is where we are today, right? This is the whole purpose of this episode, is to tie it all together today. And I would argue that the Cybertruck is Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. Why? Because it's a radical design. It has profound effect on people. People love it or hate it. Most of them hate it and then start loving it. It's exactly what happens to radical design, radical art, radical things. It's first despised and then tolerated, and then it becomes sort of the Zeitgeist. This is what the Cybertruck is. But more importantly, the question is, why is it happening today? Are there underlying forces? Like one of the quotes in the book, which I like, is that art is not some aesthetic endeavor. Art is managing the underlying forces of nature. So what the Cybertruck design is a manifestation of underlying forces of nature. And what are those forces? Well, those forces are scientific development, new knowledge. We have AI, which is the new knowledge of today. And what's new about AI is that we have an ability to, we have two things that we can do much better than before. One is we can classify things, we can create structure, we can structure nature, which in technical terms means we can find I mean, either through unsupervised learning or unsupervised deep learning. There's a course right now at Berkeley as we speak. Peter Emil is teaching it. I think for anybody who has a question about that, just go on YouTube, do a search. The course is available. Uh, Unsupervised deep learning is really the technique of how to structure nature, how to find structure in anything, whether it's biology, whether it's movies, pixels, find structure. That's the one thing. And then the other thing, I already did an episode about, I think, one of the most important talks recently given by Sergey Levin. Uh, just shout out to Berkeley. I think they're at the forefront of this. Berkeley is the place right now where things are happening. Uh, Levin talks about this, like, so we have statistical inference on one end, or let's say unsupervised learning, LLMs, things along those lines, autoregressive models, transformers. But then we have optimization, which is reinforcement learning. And both of them together, that is the new thing. That is the new kind of knowledge. That is what AI is already and is going to be in the future. And the result of that is that we're going to have task-oriented machines that can reason, that can structure the world, and then reason from that and find optimal solutions to problems. This is really fundamentally what's going to happen. Now, this is again another revolution in consciousness because it fundamentally changes the way humans will perceive, are perceiving, should perceive, whatever word you want to use. Theory, right? What is theory? Theory is sort of a mapping of what we think is versus what actually is. That's what theory is. It helps us understand how to build a bridge, how to build a computer, because the better we map our understanding of nature, the more we can navigate it, the better we can use it for our own purposes, whether it's, again, building a bridge or whether it's understanding economics and managing a country, whether it's understanding how to run a business. Theory can be applied to all kinds of things. So theory is really the lifeblood of progress. Theory is what distinguishes me from my cat, because unfortunately, my cat, I love her, but she just doesn't seem to have a lot of theory in her head. She's pretty good at certain things, catching a mouse, cleaning herself. Like, she's really good at all those kinds of things. But her theory, building a theory about the world, navigating the world based on that, whether she needs to, she's not very good at that. Let's leave it at that. So this is the revolution in consciousness, and I think the Cybertruck is the manifestation of that. And what it means is, in my opinion, a couple of things. What is the manifestation of Cybertruck? Again, it's this masculine stereotype. Again, caveat: it doesn't mean just men. It could be any kind of gender. That's not the point here. But the stereotype of masculinity, or the stereotype of accountability, of you eat what you catch, you have you anything that's possible under the laws of physics is allowed. You can do it. You can make it happen. All you need is knowledge, and you need risk and guts, cojones, if you will. All of these things are manifesting themselves in the Cybertruck. On top of that, it's also in the technology space. It has radical new design features, such as it's driven by electricity. It's a software-defined car. So those are new things that might not be visible but it's not just about what you see. It's also how you feel about it. It's also how it behaves. So all of these things are radical. Certainly, there's probably more iterations coming. So we're still in the early days, but it's the same with the Demoiselles d'Avignon. That painting was a first manifestation of what followed in Cubism and then later on modern art. So we have this new crossroad in history. Human human endeavor, progress, all of these, we're at the crossroads. This is a new area, this is a new beginning, and the Cybertruck is a manifestation. It's not the only one. There's other things. I believe we will have revolutions in art, and we'll probably see even more, much better designs and art that will come from this new revolution of consciousness. But to summarize, we are at the crossroads. So we went from Galileo to Newton to Einstein, Heisenberg, and now we're in this new area of AI, I call it the area of hyperconjecture. So theory is going to be driven by statistical reasoning and optimization. This is what theory is going to look like. So there's no a priori structure, there's no a priori knowledge, there's nothing a priori. Everything is driven by whatever we can see and feel and capture and structure today. So this is in line with the multiverse, interpretation of quantum physics, which means that there's no a priori theory, because we could be in one branch of the multiverse that has certain things that others don't have. So we are definitely, there's no such thing as an a priori theory other than whatever is not possible under the laws of physics. And as far as we know today, we can't go faster than the speed of light, which applies to all multiverses. Things along those lines. There's a possibility that there are multiverses that have different types of laws of physics, which is, I think, one of the, 5 universes. The 5th is the one where even the laws of physics are different, but I don't want to go there. I just want to stay grounded here in this particular, call it multiverse that we are in, where we function, and we are at the crossroads of massive scientific breakthroughs, of a revolution in consciousness, and it manifests itself, amongst other things, in the design of the Cybertruck. The same. And just to be clear, the Cybertruck certainly is not isolated. Okay, it's within the context of Tesla, within the context of SpaceX. This is a can-do environment. An environment. Again, I'm using masculinity as an allegory here. Another interesting point is that if you take the acceptance of the Tesla design as a whole, and Cybertruck in specific, but Tesla as a whole now, it is primarily being adopted by a new upper middle class, up and coming middle class in Asia, in particular in China. Actually, I should say China, not even Asia, because it's not happening in Japan, and I'm not sure about Korea and all the other countries. But Asia has an upper middle class, middle to upper middle class, which is highly mobile, upward mobile, in terms of academic, and the way you measure that is just academics, ambition. The faculties in the U.S. are all full of Chinese people doing postdocs and all that kind of stuff, and it's just the kind of ambition that comes through China is just one of a kind, and you can see that both in female and male individuals, because again, this has nothing to do with the actual gender of a person. Like I would say, a Chinese woman has as much masculinity in that, again, that allegorical way of I can do it. It's my life. I decide what I do. Those types of things. She could be still, a feminine person with all that, dress nicely and then paint her fingernails, whatnot. She can do all of that stuff, but still have that tiger, we call it the tiger mom, or the tiger view, or the aggressiveness maybe of a man, of a stereotype man, of course. Again, I'm sorry for the gender stuff, but I'm just using these words to illustrate a little bit what I mean, and I'm perfectly fine with transgender type, individuality, but the allegory, the actual sociology of what I'm talking about is usually related to the male side of things. So again, we have this upper middle class in China, which is accepting it, and there's a line in Unger's book which is amazing. So the people that discovered Picasso, particularly a couple from Oakland, California, the Steins, first they come from America. turn of 20th century America is a backwater, particularly California. It takes people from there to come and discover the greatest innovation in art since the Renaissance in the middle of Paris. It's not the French, it's certainly not the aristocracy or those people who supposedly know art, the connoisseurs, none of those people. It is two people from Oakland, California, and there's a line in the book where Picasso says, Gertrude Stein, the sister, there's a brother and a sister. The sister, she's neither a woman nor a man, she's an American. And I think that's exactly what I mean. The Tesla doesn't apply neither to a woman nor to a man. The Tesla applies to the Chinese, to the upper middle class Chinese. Let's be precise here, because of course, with 1.5 billion people, there's a lot of different types of people. So what I'm talking about is this Silicon Valley type Chinese person that comes here, goes to Stanford, runs a company, and look at Silicon Valley. Jensen Huang, the CEO of AMD, and faculty at Stanford, full of Chinese people. Those types of people, they are adopting the Tesla design. Now, they might be Musk fans and whatnot, but this is more subtle than that. When Gertrude Stein embraced Picasso, she wasn't interested in Picasso. I think she was a lesbian anyway. She didn't really care about him or Barcelona or Spain or none of that. She embraced a new type of art, a new type of being, a new type of thinking. And that is what modern art became. It was this multifaceted, multi-complex space-time and quantum physics encompassing social consciousness. And the same way the Tesla design, in particular the Cybertruck, but Cybertruck is embedded in a Tesla culture. This is it's not just the Cyber, but it's a can-do environment. I can sit down, learn something, and change something, and solve a problem, and make it better, and potentially make money, solve a problem, again, help people become a businessman, whatever the result of this endeavor is not even that important. It's a cultural, it's a social consciousness that I don't see in Europe. I don't see in the East Coast of America. There's way too much status thinking, vanity, conventions, it is what it is, without any further critique. This is the reality. So we can see it again, the 35% market share in Hong Kong of Tesla versus 3% market share in Switzerland is a fact. That's not something I came up with. And those are the kinds of things that I think prove, actually, if you want some real proof about the fact that there is this new social consciousness and a social revolution and a revolution in consciousness, and it always happens in the outside. So while Tesla is designed within the Western context, in the Western world, Musk and his people, particularly the design part of things, are separating themselves from the traditional Western values, and they're being embraced by this new Asian upper middle class.